The ballroom felt like a snow globe someone had shaken too hard. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the marble floor, and every polished surface reflected smiling faces that didn't belong to me. I stood near the back wall, fingers wrapped around a champagne flute that trembled just enough to make the bubbles tremor like nerves. Then my father lifted the microphone. His voice rolled across the room with the confidence of a man who had never once doubted he owned every space he entered. At least one of my daughters knows how to make something of herself. A few polite chuckles fluttered through the crowd. He gestured broadly toward Victoria, glowing in silk and diamonds beside her new husband. Victoria's got the mansion, the career, the perfect husband. His smile widened. Emma's still in that shoebox apartment pretending her little laptop job is a real career. 200 people laughed. The sound didn't hit me all at once. It came in waves sharp, echoing bursts bouncing off the high ceiling and glass walls. My stomach turned instantly. The sweet smell of the gardenia arrangements, which had seemed elegant an hour earlier, suddenly clung to the air like spoiled perfume. The silk of my dress stuck to the back of my knees. I realized I'd been standing perfectly still for too long. The marble beneath me blurred into strange geometric patterns. Black squares, white diamonds, endless symmetry. I focused on them like they might hold me upright. This wasn't the first time my father had humiliated me in public, but it was the most expensive stage he'd ever rented to do it. From across the ballroom I saw my mother, Linda. Her lips curved in that careful, approving smile she wore whenever my father entertained people. Not quite a grin, more like the satisfied look someone gets when a trick lands exactly as planned. Victoria lifted a manicured hand to her mouth in theatrical shock. "Oh, Dad," she mouthed, though her eyes sparkled like she'd just heard the punchline of a very funny joke. Marcus leaned toward his groomsmen and whispered something. Two of them glanced over at me. One of them snorted into his drink. I inhaled slowly. My therapist called this moment the surge, that rush of humiliation where your brain wants to either explode or disappear. Instead, she'd taught me to ground myself. So I mentally walked through my apartment. My couch that still smelled faintly like the lavender cleaner I used every Sunday. The chipped blue mug I always used for morning coffee. The soft hum of my laptop fan when I worked late. The view of the tiny park across the street where kids played soccer every evening. 5 things I'm grateful for, Emma. That was the rule. I kept breathing until the laughter faded and the clinking of glasses replaced it. Someone near me whispered, "That must be the other daughter." I took a small sip of champagne, mostly so my hands had something to do. The wedding itself had cost $85,000. I knew because Victoria had bragged about it during a casual brunch 3 months ago. $85,000 for orchids, violinists, and imported marble place cards. But as I looked around the room, what caught my attention wasn't the luxury. It was the florist's assistant kneeling beside a centerpiece near the stage, quietly fixing a drooping arrangement. Her hands moved fast, tired, precise. I'd noticed her earlier outside the ballroom loading crates from a van. 14-hour shift, probably. Across the room, 2 catering servers slipped through the crowd, with trays balanced perfectly on their palms. One of them flexed his shoulder when he thought no one was watching. Invisible people keeping the night perfect. My family had never been very good at seeing those kinds of things. My fingers drifted to the pearls resting against my collarbone. Grandmother Catherine's necklace. The only jewelry I wore tonight. The pearls were slightly uneven real ones. Always were and cool against my skin. 8 months ago, I'd stood beside her hospital bed holding that same necklace, while machines hummed quietly around us. She squeezed my hand once before closing her eyes. 3 days after her funeral, a lawyer called. His office smelled like leather and old paper. He handed me a sealed envelope and said, "Your grandmother wanted you to sign these." I signed. Then I placed the documents in a safe deposit box. I hadn't opened them since. Knowing what was inside felt dangerous. Especially tonight, when anger kept brushing the edges of my calm. "Emma?" I turned. Chelsea Victoria's maid of honor stood beside me. Her silver dress shimmered under the lights, but her expression looked oddly serious. "I just wanted to say, that toast was kind of awful," she murmured. I blinked. Sympathy from Chelsea was unexpected. Before I could respond, she leaned closer. Can I tell you something weird? Sure. She glanced across the room to where Victoria posed for photos. Your sister's been asking me something all morning. What kind of something? Chelsea lowered her voice further. She keeps asking if I think her parents would still help her if things went bad. I frowned. Bad how? Chelsea shrugged. I don't know. She just keeps repeating it. Then she added quietly, weird thing to worry about on your wedding day, right? Across the ballroom, Victoria laughed brightly as a photographer snapped another picture. Perfect bride. Perfect smile. But now I noticed the way she kept glancing toward our parents' table. Just for a second each time. Like someone checking whether the safety net was still there. Interesting. I filed the thought away carefully. Cracks in perfection usually started small. A server passed by with another tray of champagne. I set my glass down and slipped toward the hallway. Leaving early suddenly felt like oxygen. But halfway to the exit, my mother intercepted me. Emma? Linda said sharply. Where do you think you're going? I'm tired, I said. You'll stay for family photos. Her voice tightened into that polished public tone. Otherwise people will talk. Of course they would. I studied her for a moment. Then I nodded. Fine. 3 more months. That was the quiet promise I made to myself as I turned back toward the ballroom. 3 months of silence. After that, my life would belong entirely to me. People assume humiliation at a wedding is the worst moment in a story like this. It wasn't. What happened in that ballroom was just the loudest version of something that had been happening my entire life. If you zoom backward far enough, the pattern becomes almost clinical. Age 7. I won a regional art competition. 200 kids from 3 counties had submitted drawings, and mine, an awkward watercolor of a blue heron standing in a marsh, ended up taking first place. The award ceremony happened in a small auditorium that smelled like dust and tempera paint. My parents didn't come. They were at Victoria's soccer game. Later that night, my mother glanced at the ribbon and said, "That's nice, Emma. A hobby like that is good for creativity." She said it the way people talk about knitting. The next day, my drawing got taped to the refrigerator for exactly 4 days before being replaced by Victoria's team photo. Age 12. My middle school science fair project was about low-cost water purification systems. I built a layered filtration model using gravel, charcoal, and sand. The judges gave it a highly commended certificate and invited me to present it at a district showcase. Meanwhile, Victoria's Debate Club handed out participation plaques at their end-of-season banquet. Guess which one ended up framed in the living room? Hint, it wasn't the filtration system. By the time I was a teenager, I understood something fundamental about the Whitmore household. Recognition flowed in one direction. But there was one person who saw the imbalance clearly. My grandmother, Catherine. She never made a big show of defending me. That wasn't her style. Instead, she quietly redirected the current. When I was 14, she started taking me to art museums downtown. Not the flashy modern ones everyone posted on Instagram. She preferred quiet galleries with wooden floors that creaked softly underfoot. She'd stand beside a painting and say things like, "Notice the light in that corner. The artist wants you to pause there." Then afterward, we'd sit in a cafe where she drank black tea and explained compound interest using the sugar packets. "A woman should have money of her own," she told me once, sliding 2 packets across the table like chess pieces. Not because she distrusts people, because trusting herself matters most. At 19, during Thanksgiving dinner, the difference between my sister and me was displayed like a centerpiece. We had 20 relatives around the table. My father carved the turkey with theatrical pride. Someone asked about college majors. Victoria announced she was studying business administration. My father lifted his glass. "That's my girl," he said. "Future CEO material." Then he gestured toward me. "Emma's doing graphic design. She'll probably marry someone successful." Laughter rippled politely through the room. My grandmother didn't laugh. She watched my father with an expression I didn't fully understand at the time, something measured, almost calculating. Later that night, she found me on the back porch. Cold air, faint smell of rosemary from her garden. She touched my shoulder gently. "I'm handling something," she said quietly. "You won't see it for years, but I'm making sure you'll be fine." I didn't ask what she meant. Victoria's story, meanwhile, looked perfect from the outside. But perfection can be its own kind of cage. She grew up needing applause the way some people need oxygen. Every accomplishment had to be bigger than the last one, louder, more visible. Once, during my senior year of high school, I spent 3 months building a portfolio for art school applications. 2 days before the deadline, the entire folder vanished from my computer. Deleted. Victoria admitted it a week later with a shrug. Oh, relax. Sibling rivalry. My parents' response? Emma, don't be so sensitive. Victoria's just competitive. It means she cares. That was the moment I started planning my exit. After college, I moved into the apartment my father loved to mock. 600 square feet, third floor walk-up, slightly crooked windows that whistled when the wind hit them. The rent was $1,650 a month. My freelance design work paid about $120,000 a year from international clients, tech startups in Berlin, publishing houses in Toronto. But I lived on $40,000. The rest went into investments. My neighborhood had cafes where baristas remembered your order, and sidewalks busy with freelancers carrying laptops. My parents never understood why I loved it. But I built something there. Marisol, my Pilates instructor, who somehow always knew when I needed encouragement. Dev, a software engineer who once spent 3 hours helping me troubleshoot a website glitch. James, a financial advisor who taught me diversification before I even knew what a trust was. One evening, 12 of us squeezed into my living room for a creative meetup. Designers, writers, developers. Someone brought organic wine. Marisol looked around at the mismatched chairs and said, "This place has better energy than any mansion." That sentence stayed with me. 8 months ago, 2 weeks after my grandmother's funeral, I walked into Attorney Harold Finch's office. Mahogany walls. Heavy curtains. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a trust. $2.3 million. Vesting on my 30th birthday, November 15th. One rule. I couldn't tell my parents or Victoria before then. Violation meant forfeiting everything to the National Art Education Foundation. There was also a handwritten letter. You built yourself quietly while they tore you down loudly, Catherine wrote. This isn't reward money, it's armor. 6 months before the wedding, I met Marcus. Corporate acquisitions, he said. Very charming. But during dinner, he asked my father unusual questions. Have you done estate planning yet? And how are you dividing things between your daughters? The questions lingered in my mind like background noise. Victoria got engaged 3 months later. Wedding planning turned into its own strange theater. I was technically a bridesmaid, but the dress cost $400 and didn't fit properly. Well, maybe if you could afford a tailor, Victoria said lightly. My mother nodded. Emma, try to be happy for your sister. The bachelorette party in Napa included a luxury villa, except apparently not enough bedrooms for me. Just meet us for dinner, Victoria texted. Meanwhile, my apartment kept filling with laughter and late-night brainstorming sessions. The week of the wedding arrived. August 20th, 87 days until the trust vested. Every night, I reread Catherine's letter. One line especially. When they finally see who you are, you won't need to tell them anything. The night before the wedding, my phone rang. Victoria. She was crying. What if Marcus doesn't really love me? She whispered. What if he just wants Dad's money? I hesitated before answering. Why would you marry someone you have to ask that about? There was a long pause. Then she said something that chilled me. Because people like us don't get loved for who we are. We get loved for what we offer. Her voice hardened slightly. You wouldn't understand. You've never had anything anyone wanted. The line went quiet after that. But I sat there in my tiny apartment staring at the wall, realizing something strange. Victoria thought she was the lucky one. She had no idea how trapped she actually was. 3 days after the wedding, my phone buzzed while I was sitting at the small table by my apartment window, reviewing a brand layout for a publishing client in Dublin. The message was a family group text from my mother. Family brunch Sunday. Victoria and Marcus want to share news. Just those words. No greeting. No question. An announcement disguised as an invitation. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Part of me wanted to ignore it entirely. The memory of my father's toast still sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. But curiosity is a stubborn instinct. So Sunday morning, I drove 20 minutes to the restaurant. My parents favored a polished place with white tablecloths and a pianist playing slow jazz near the bar. Victoria was already glowing when I arrived. That was the first word that came to mind. Not happy. Glowing. She wore a cream-colored wrap dress that hugged her waist carefully, like it had been chosen to highlight something specific. Marcus stood behind her chair with one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. My father looked like someone who'd just won a lottery ticket. "Emma!" Linda called, waving as if the wedding toast had never happened. I slid into the empty seat beside Marisol. Yes, I had brought her. Not because I needed backup, though maybe I did, but because she had calmly insisted the night before. "Your family has a pattern," she'd said. "Patterns are easier to see when witnesses exist." Coffee was poured. Menus opened. But Victoria barely waited 2 minutes before clinking her glass. "We have news," she announced dramatically. Marcus squeezed her hand. She placed her palm against her stomach with a rehearsed smile. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant." The table erupted. My father actually stood up to hug her. Linda dabbed imaginary tears from her eyes. Marcus looked pleased in the way people do when they've just secured something valuable. Then he cleared his throat. "And there's more," he added smoothly. "We're buying a house." Victoria nodded eagerly. "A real one, in Brookridge." That name meant something in this city. Bridgeridge wasn't just expensive. It was the kind of neighborhood with iron gates, private security patrols, and property taxes that could fund small schools. Marcus leaned back. "It's a $1.2 million place," he said casually. "But with your parents' help, of course." My father beamed like a proud investor. "We're giving them $300,000 for the down payment," he announced. "Young families need support." Linda placed her hand over Victoria's. "We're just happy to help our successful daughter build her future." Then she turned toward me. The shift in her tone was subtle but surgical. "You know, Emma," she said, folding her napkin carefully, "if you'd made better choices, maybe we could help you too." My fork paused midair. "But we can't subsidize your lifestyle experiments." Silence stretched for half a second. Then Marisol spoke. Calm. Clear. "Emma's lifestyle is intentional minimalism," she said. "She runs an international client network. What exactly do you think she needs subsidizing for?" Every person at the table froze. Victoria laughed nervously. "Oh, Marisol," she said sweetly. "That's adorable. Emma's always been like this, defensive about her limitations." Limitations. Interesting word. During the awkward quiet that followed, Marcus turned to my father. "So, speaking of the future," he said lightly, "have you two finalized the estate plan yet?" The question slid across the table like a chess move. My father shrugged. "Everything's split equally in the will, of course," he said. "But we prefer helping while we're alive, where help is needed most." Marcus nodded slowly, but for a brief second, his expression flickered. Not satisfaction. Disappointment. It was so quick no one else noticed. Except me. Later that afternoon, curiosity gnawed at me hard enough that I opened my laptop. Marcus's LinkedIn profile was polished but oddly thin. Job gaps. A company called Prestige Acquisitions LLC. The website looked expensive, but generic stock images of glass buildings and vague phrases about strategic growth. Something about it felt hollow. So I kept digging. The business registration database showed Prestige had been incorporated 18 months earlier. Minimal capital. 2 listed partners. Marcus Whitmore. And someone with the same last name as him. That night I texted Dev. "Random question," I wrote. "Can you run a casual background check on someone?" Dev replied within 5 minutes. "Curiosity project or emergency?" "Both." 2 days later he came over with takeout and a laptop. "Okay," he said slowly. "This guy has history. Failed startup debt. A previous marriage. A restraining order that had later been withdrawn but still documented. And a pattern of relationships with women, whose families had serious money." I stared at the screen. "So he hunts wealth," I said quietly. Dev didn't sugarcoat it. "That's what the pattern suggests." 8 days later I received an email from Harold Finch. Subject line: "Per Catherine's instructions." Inside was a message asking me to collect a sealed letter on September 1st. When I opened it, the handwriting was unmistakable. My grandmother's. "Emma, the letter began. By now you've probably seen the family's cruelty escalate. My throat tightened. You may feel tempted to warn them, she wrote, to protect them from themselves. Don't. The words blurred slightly as I kept reading. They have made choices for decades. Your silence is not cruelty. It is a boundary. I folded the letter carefully. But boundaries are harder at 2 in the morning. That was when Victoria called. She was drunk. And crying. I found texts on Marcus's phone, she whispered. What kind of texts? He's messaging someone named Vanessa about the plan working. My stomach twisted. What do you want me to do? I asked. There was a long pause. Tell me I'm paranoid, she said finally. Tell me you're jealous and making me doubt him. So that was what she needed. Permission to ignore reality. I can't tell you what to see or not see, I said quietly. That's your choice. She hung up, angry. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I contacted Rachel, an old college friend who worked in corporate fraud investigation. Within a week, she called back. Emma, she said bluntly, Prestige Acquisitions is basically a shell. My chest tightened. Meaning? Marcus and his partner, who's actually his cousin, have been flipping properties through questionable financing structures. The state attorney general's office is investigating them. I closed my eyes. So if my parents give him money, they could be funding fraud. That was the moment the moral dilemma became real. I called Harold Finch. Can I warn them? I asked. You can share public information, he said carefully. But your family has a pattern of attacking messengers. Still, I tried. I asked my mother to meet for coffee. Just us. No audience. I brought printed documents, business registrations, court filings, financial records. She listened for exactly 30 seconds before her expression hardened. Emma, she said slowly, this is disturbing. Relief flickered. Until she finished the sentence. That you'd go to these lengths to sabotage your sister's happiness. The words landed like ice water. I'm trying to protect her, I said. Linda shook her head. I'm telling Victoria you did this. And honestly, you might need therapy. Within an hour, my phone rang. Victoria's name flashed across the screen. She was screaming before I could speak. How dare you hire a private investigator on my husband? I didn't hire anyone. You're pathetic, Emma. You can't find a man, so you try to destroy my marriage? I looked at public records. Public records? She snapped. You expect me to believe you just stumbled onto this? Click. The line went dead. That evening I met Marisol, Dev, and James for dinner. Halfway through explaining what happened, my voice broke. I tried to warn them, I said quietly. Dev leaned forward. You tried. That's all you can do. James added calmly. If they invest in that house while he's under investigation, they could lose a lot more than $300,000. Marisol watched me carefully. Your family punishes you for caring, she said. Her words hung in the air. Later that night I sat alone at my desk calculating dates. 75 days until my 30th birthday. 75 days until the trust vested. For a moment, temptation crept in. I could tell them. I could say, I'm not jealous. I have my own money. But Catherine's letter sat beside my keyboard. Let consequences teach what love couldn't. 2 weeks later, Marcus sent me a LinkedIn request. Message attached. Hey Emma, no hard feelings about the wedding jokes. Family's family, right? I'd love to grab coffee and talk branding for Prestige. Fishing. Testing whether I'd told anyone. I declined politely. My schedule's full. After that, Victoria's Instagram became a performance. Pregnancy updates. Photo shoots in front of the house they hadn't actually purchased yet. Captions like, surrounded by real love, not fake concern. I unfollowed quietly. October 15th arrived. Exactly 60 days until my birthday. That afternoon, an invitation appeared in my mailbox. Victoria's baby shower and new home reveal. Date, November 20th. 5 days after I turned 30. Inside the envelope, Linda had written a small note. We understand if you can't afford to contribute much, but your presence would mean something. I stared at the paper for a long time. Then I checked the RSVP box. Yes. That evening, Harold Finch called for a routine check-in. Before hanging up, he added something unexpected. Your grandmother left one final letter, he said. For your birthday. What kind of letter? He paused. She called it the permission letter. After the call ended, I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on one by one. 60 days. 60 days until freedom. I turned 30 on a quiet Friday morning. No balloons. No dramatic milestones. Just sunlight slipping through the narrow gap between my curtains and the soft sound of traffic waking up outside my apartment building. My phone buzzed before I even got out of bed. Marisol had sent a voice message. 30 looks good on you already, Corita. Coffee later? Dev texted next. Happy level up day. Don't forget you're still winning. Then James. Congratulations on another trip around the sun. Call me when the paperwork's done. Those 3 messages made me smile. Nothing from my parents. Nothing from Victoria. Which honestly felt appropriate. At 10 o'clock sharp, I walked into Harold Finch's office. Same dark wood walls. Same heavy leather chairs. Same faint scent of old paper and polished brass. He greeted me with a warm handshake. Happy birthday, Emma. Thank you. He slid a stack of documents across the desk. Today, the trust vests officially. Once you sign these, the funds become entirely yours with no restrictions. I skimmed the numbers even though I already knew the estimate. After growth and investments over the years, the total sat at $2,307,542.18. The commas made the number look unreal. My hand paused above the pen. Your grandmother believed in you deeply, Harold said gently. I know. I signed. Each page felt strangely calm. Not exciting, not overwhelming, just final. When the last document was complete, Harold opened a drawer and handed me a sealed envelope. Catherine's handwriting curved across the front. Emma. The paper trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single page. Emma, it began. Today you are free. My throat tightened immediately. Free from proving yourself. Free from their measurements. Free from the lie that you are less than. The words blurred as tears slipped down my cheeks. This money is not power, she wrote. You already had that. It is simply permission to stop waiting for them to see you. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. They won't. And that is not your failure, it is their poverty. The letter ended simply. Build the life you want. Leave room only for people who celebrate you. And Emma, you do not owe anyone a performance, not an explanation, not a reveal. Just live, loudly, joyfully, without them. I sat quietly for a long moment. Harold gave me space. Finally, I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. I think she knew exactly what she was doing, I said softly. She usually did, Harold replied. At 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang. Victoria. Her name flashed across the screen like a warning light. I answered anyway. She was hysterical. The house deal collapsed, she cried. Marcus's company is under investigation and the bank refused the loan. I leaned against my kitchen counter. I'm sorry that happened. Dad is threatening to pull the down payment money, she continued, voice shaking. Emma, I'm pregnant, and we might have to move back in with Mom and Dad. She inhaled sharply. Can you lend me $5,000? Just until things settle down. It's for legal fees. $5,000. A tiny fraction of what sat in my accounts now. My fingers tightened around the phone. This was the moment. I could help easily. Or I could remind her I had tried to warn them. Instead, I said calmly, Victoria, I can't help financially. Silence. Then outrage. You can't or you won't. I think you should speak with a lawyer about protecting yourself from Marcus's business problems. You're unbelievable, she shouted. I'm your sister. I've been your sister for 30 years, I said quietly. That didn't stop you from mocking me at your wedding. Her breathing turned sharp. Since when do you have boundaries? Since today, I replied. Happy birthday to me. And I hung up. 2 hours later, my mother called. Come to the house immediately, she demanded. We're having an emergency family meeting. I'll be there at 7, I said. But I have other commitments first. I didn't. But it felt important to say. At 7:15, I walked into the Whitmore living room. My father stood near the fireplace with his arms crossed. Linda perched stiffly on the couch. Victoria looked exhausted and red-eyed. Marcus leaned against the wall, watching me with open hostility. Robert started immediately. Victoria tells us you refused to help your pregnant sister. His tone carried heavy disappointment. I'm not surprised, he added. You've always been selfish. I sat down calmly. How is declining a request selfish? Linda leaned forward. Emma, we've supported you emotionally for years despite your struggles. The least you could do is help family during a crisis. What support? I asked quietly. Please be specific. Silence filled the room. Victoria finally snapped. We invited you to things. Yes, I said. You invited me to be mocked. Marcus pushed away from the wall. You're jealous, he said bluntly. You tried sabotaging our marriage with fake documents. Those documents were public records, I replied. Your company is under investigation for fraud. His jaw tightened. Robert slammed his hand on the table. Even if that were true, family helps family. He pointed at me. We gave you a roof for 18 years and paid for college. You paid half, I corrected calmly. I took out $47,000 in loans and repaid them myself. Victoria's tuition, apartment, and car were fully funded. The room went quiet. You also gave her $50,000 for her wedding, I continued, and $300,000 for a house. Linda scoffed. We gave money where it would be used wisely. What would you do with serious funds? Wasted on that bohemian lifestyle of yours. For a moment I considered telling them, showing them every bank statement. But Catherine's letter echoed in my mind. You owe them nothing. So I stood. I'm leaving, I said. Victoria's voice cracked. You've always hated me. I turned back slowly. I don't hate you, I said. I pity you. Her face twisted. You have a husband you don't trust, parents who only love appearances, and a baby arriving in chaos. I have peace. I walked toward the door. Marcus followed me outside. You think you're better than us? He sneered. I unlocked my modest Honda Civic. Marcus, I said evenly, I'm not judging you. I slid into the driver's seat. The state attorney general is. Then I drove away. Back home, I called Harold. I set boundaries, I told him. But I didn't mention the trust. You didn't need to, he replied. Do you want to tell them now? No, I said after a moment. They're not entitled to my finances. Over the next day, Victoria sent 47 texts. Anger, guilt, threats, bargaining. I read them all and answered none. 2 days later, a local news article exploded across social media. Real estate fraud investigation. Prestige acquisitions mentioned by name. Marcus included. My father called immediately. Did you leak this? No, I said. It was public information. You should have warned us more forcefully. I gave you documents, I reminded him. You called me bitter. The next day, Linda tried a softer approach. Honey, she said sweetly, we've been thinking. Perhaps we were too hard on you. What changed? I asked. A pause. We realized we may have been unfair. Or you realized Victoria's situation is worse than you thought. Silence. I appreciate the apology, I said gently. But I'm not available for dinner. The baby shower invitation arrived soon after. Marisol shook her head when I told her. You don't owe them attendance. Dev agreed. Why walk back into that? So I declined politely. Victoria's reply came instantly. I never want to hear from you again. Oddly, relief washed over me. Thanksgiving arrived a few days later. Instead of my parents' dining room, I hosted Friendsgiving. 7 people crowded around my little table. We cooked together, laughed. Marisol raised her glass. To Emma, she said, who finally chose herself. I cried. But they were happy tears. The following week, James and I mapped out a plan for the trust. A condo in my neighborhood. $450,000 cash. $50,000 donated to the National Art Education Foundation in Catherine's name. $100,000 toward a scholarship fund for first-generation design students. The rest invested carefully. Life, redesigned. On November 28th, I closed on the condo. The realtor posted a congratulatory photo online. Apparently, the internet travels fast. 2 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. Robert's voice was furious. Where did you get money for a condo? With my own funds, I said calmly. We're your parents. We have a right to know. No, I replied. You don't. Linda grabbed the phone. If you inherited money and hid it from us, that's betrayal. I exhaled slowly. Yes, I said. I did inherit money. Silence fell. From Grandma Catherine. A trust that vested on my birthday. How much? Linda demanded. That's private. Victoria screamed in the background. You got millions and let us struggle? I let you face the consequences of your choices, I said. Then I hung up and blocked every number. December 18th felt colder than the calendar suggested. The air had that thin metallic bite that always reminds me of childhood winters, sharp enough to wake every nerve. I arrived at the small cafe 15 minutes early, mostly because I needed time to settle the quiet storm of emotions that still lingered around anything involving my extended family. Jenna waved when she saw me through the window. She was bundled in a soft gray coat, hair tucked into a loose bun, a mug already steaming between her hands. Jenna had always looked like the calmest person in any room, like someone who instinctively spoke in gentle tones even when chaos was happening around her. When I sat down, she studied my face with careful concern. Are you okay? She asked softly. This family stuff is brutal. I let out a slow breath, wrapping my fingers around the warmth of my tea. I'm better than I've ever been, I said honestly. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Really? Yeah. I paused, searching for the right words. Losing people who diminish you isn't loss, it's clarity. Jenna nodded slowly, like she was letting the idea sink into her bones. Then she looked down at the table. Can I still be in your life? She asked. The question surprised me. I know they're my family, she continued, but I've watched them treat you horribly for years. I hated it. I just didn't know how to step in. Her voice cracked a little. Sometimes it felt like everyone else was pretending nothing was happening. My chest tightened. Jenna had been quiet during family events, but now that I thought about it, she had always been the one asking if I needed a ride home, or texting afterward to check if I was okay. Of course you can still be in my life, I said. She looked up quickly. You've always been different, I added gently. You see people, not performances. Relief softened her whole posture. We talked for almost 2 hours. About work. About the strange emotional aftershock that comes when you finally stop chasing approval. About how weirdly peaceful my life felt now. Before we left, Jenna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm really proud of you, she said. That meant more than she probably realized. By the end of December, my life had shifted in ways that still felt surreal. Financial security changes your relationship with work in ways people don't talk about enough. For most of my career, every project had carried a quiet layer of pressure. Rent, bills, survival. Now, for the first time, I could choose work based on meaning instead of necessity. A nonprofit arts organization approached me about redesigning their educational materials for community programs. The pay was embarrassingly small, but the mission, bringing art access to underfunded schools, lit something inside me. I said yes without hesitation. Around the same time, I joined a creative co-working hub downtown. The space smelled like espresso, fresh wood, and ambition. Sunlight poured through tall industrial windows onto long communal tables where illustrators, coders, writers, and filmmakers worked side by side. Instead of competing for scraps, everyone there seemed focused on building something real. Within weeks, my network expanded in ways that would have taken years before. Projects started arriving not through frantic pitching, but through conversations. I also hired my first assistant. Lena was 23, fresh out of design school, and terrified during her interview. You're overqualified for the role, she said nervously. I smiled. I'm not looking for perfect, I told her. I'm looking for potential. Mentoring her became one of the most unexpectedly rewarding parts of my week. For the first time, my career felt less like survival and more like legacy. On December 24th, Harold Finch called. I have one final item from your grandmother, he said. Curiosity flickered through me. When I arrived at his office, he handed me a small flash drive. She recorded this during her final months, he explained. My stomach tightened. I watched the video that evening in my living room. Catherine appeared on the screen sitting in her favorite armchair, wrapped in a soft cream sweater. She looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were still bright. Emma, she said gently. My breath caught. I watched your parents create a competition between you and Victoria that neither of you asked for. Her voice carried that familiar, calm clarity. Victoria became addicted to winning. You became resilient through losing. Tears blurred my vision. But here's what they didn't understand, she continued. You were never in a race. She leaned slightly closer to the camera. You were building character. My chest tightened painfully. This trust isn't about making you equal to Victoria, she said. You were always more than equal. I pressed my hand to my mouth. It's about giving you the resources to build the life your integrity deserves. Her voice softened. Don't hate them, sweetheart. They're operating from their own wounds. A long pause. But don't sacrifice yourself to heal them. That's not your job. My tears were flowing freely now. Your job, she said with a faint smile, is to be joyfully, unapologetically yourself. Then she added one final sentence. I'm so proud of who you are. I watched the video 5 times that night. Each viewing felt different. First grief, then gratitude, then validation. Finally, a quiet sense of peace. Christmas Day arrived with laughter instead of tension. 7 of us gathered in my condo for a potluck. Marisol brought homemade tamales that filled the kitchen with warm, spicy aromas. Dev created a playlist featuring everyone's favorite songs. James insisted on a gratitude circle before dessert. When it was my turn, everyone looked at me expectantly. This year, I said slowly, I learned that family isn't about blood. I glanced around the table. It's about who shows up, who celebrates you, who tells you the truth with love. Later that night, I thought about Victoria. 7 months pregnant. Probably sitting in my parents' living room. Probably miserable. I sent a single message. Wishing you and the baby health and peace. If you ever want to talk, really talk, not perform, I'm here. There was no reply. And strangely, I was okay with that. New Year's Eve arrived quietly. During a small gathering, someone asked about resolutions. I surprised myself with my answer. To live so fully in my truth, I said, that I stopped checking if anyone's watching. The room erupted in cheers. I meant it. Plans were already forming. A solo trip to Italy. An art therapy certification program. Volunteering with at-risk teens. The money made those choices possible. But courage made them real. On January 15th, something unexpected arrived. A handwritten letter from Linda. 2 pages. Careful script. She admitted she had been harder on me than Victoria. She acknowledged that maybe they had pushed their dreams onto us instead of seeing who we actually were. She asked if there was space to rebuild slowly. But some things were missing. No mention of the wedding humiliation. No acknowledgement of Marcus. No reference to the trust. It was partial accountability. I sat with the letter for a week before responding. My reply was short. Thank you for writing. I need more time. You might consider therapy to explore the favoritism patterns you mentioned. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection either. Just honesty. On February 3rd, Jenna called with news. Victoria had the baby, she said. Ah, girl. The baby's name was Sophie. Marcus was already out on bail awaiting trial. Their separation was underway. I sent a gift to the hospital. A handmade baby quilt from a local artist. The card was simple. Congratulations on Sophie. Wishing you both love and strength. Later, Jenna texted me. Victoria cried when she opened it. I don't deserve this, she apparently said. Maybe she was right. But kindness wasn't about what people deserved. It was about who I chose to be. 6 months after my birthday, I sat at my desk journaling. Wins filled most of the page. A condo I loved. A thriving business. Deep friendships. Weekly volunteer work with teen artists. Level 1 art therapy certification complete. And a 3-week trip to Italy that had changed the way I saw beauty. Challenges still existed. Sometimes I felt lonely for the idea of family, but not for the reality I had lived. The biggest change was internal. I no longer rehearsed conversations with my parents in my head. I no longer scrolled their social media. I no longer compared my life to Victoria's milestones. My sense of self had solidified. On June 1st, the final test arrived. Linda called my new number. Your father had a minor stroke, she said. He's recovering. My stomach tightened. He's been asking about you. Old patterns stirred. Guilt. Obligation. But I paused. I'm sorry he's struggling, I said calmly. If he wants to reach out directly, with genuine interest in who I am, I'm open to that. Silence. But I'm not returning to a dynamic where my value depends on compliance. He's in the hospital, Emma, she snapped. This is about compassion. Compassion doesn't require me to abandon my boundaries, I said quietly. I can wish him well from a distance. She hung up. I didn't chase the conversation. That evening I sat on my balcony, as the sun slid behind the buildings. A soft breeze carried the scent of summer rain. My laptop rested on the table beside my coffee mug. I was finishing a design for a children's literacy nonprofit. Pro bono work, but deeply fulfilling. My phone buzzed with a message from a new client offering a lucrative 6-month contract. I smiled. An hour later, Marisol would arrive for our usual Friday dinner. Dev had already sent a ridiculous meme. My calendar showed next week's volunteer session with the teen art group. 3 students had asked if I would mentor them long-term. Catherine's pearl necklace rested lightly against my collarbone, a quiet reminder. I didn't have the family I was born into, but I had built the life I was meant for. And for the first time in my life, I realized something profound. I wasn't waiting for my family's approval anymore. I was too busy living to notice their absence. If you've been listening this far, I want to talk to you directly for a minute. Not as the narrator of a story. Not as the woman whose family drama you just followed like a slow-motion train wreck. Just as Emma. A 30-year-old woman sitting at her kitchen table with a mug of coffee that's already gone cold, thinking about everything this past year taught her. Because the truth is, none of what happened to me was really about money. The trust helped, obviously. I'm not going to pretend financial security doesn't change things. When your rent is covered and your future feels stable, your nervous system relaxes in ways that are hard to describe unless you've lived both versions. But emotional security? That's the real currency. And that part didn't come from the bank account. It came from learning 3 hard truths. First, you cannot control how your family treats you. You can beg, explain, overperform, shrink yourself, achieve more, apologize for things that aren't even your fault, and none of that guarantees they'll treat you with respect. The only thing you actually control is how you respond. Second, boundaries aren't cruelty. I know some of you probably felt uncomfortable when I refused to lend Victoria money, or when I told my mother I wouldn't rush to the hospital after Dad's stroke. Maybe a small voice inside you whispered, "That seems harsh." I get that reaction. I used to think the same way. But boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. Think of them like emotional fencing around your life. They're not there to hurt anyone, they're there to stop people from trampling your garden. Third, chosen family is real family. Sometimes more real than the one you share DNA with. Blood might connect you biologically, but love is built through behavior. Through consistency, through people showing up for you without asking you to become smaller so they can feel bigger. Marisol showing up with tamales on Christmas morning, that's family. Dev sending stupid memes when he knows I'm stressed, that's family. James asking thoughtful questions about my dreams, instead of judging them, that's family. Those relationships are just as meaningful as anything written on a birth certificate. Now let's talk about the trust for a second. Because the real gift Catherine gave me wasn't the money. It was permission. Permission to stop auditioning for people who had already decided I wasn't good enough. Permission to stop measuring my life using someone else's scoreboard. Permission to walk away from toxic behavior without carrying a backpack full of guilt. The dollar amount gave me options, but Catherine's letters gave me courage. And here's the part I really want you to hear. You do not need a trust fund to give yourself that permission. You just need to decide you're worth it. I know some of you listening might be the scapegoat in your family. You know exactly what that feels like. You're the one who gets criticized while your sibling gets praised. You're the one whose mistakes become permanent character flaws while someone else's disasters get explained away. You're the one who leaves family gatherings wondering if you imagined the tension or if everyone else really did just gang up on you again. If that's you, let me say something clearly. Their treatment of you says everything about them, and absolutely nothing about your value. You are not obligated to accept disrespect just because you share DNA. You're not selfish for protecting your peace. You're not bitter for refusing to fund someone else's chaos. And yes, setting boundaries will probably come with guilt. That part is normal. When you grow up inside dysfunctional dynamics, your brain learns that self-protection equals betrayal. So the first time you say no, your stomach might twist into knots. Your heart might race. You might question yourself for days afterward. That doesn't mean the boundary was wrong. It means you're rewiring years of conditioning. Another thing we need to talk about is the myth that family is everything. You've heard that phrase before, right? Usually delivered with dramatic sighs at holiday dinners. But here's the truth. Family can be everything when it's healthy, when it's mutual, when love flows in both directions. But blood relationship does not automatically entitle someone to unlimited access to your life. It doesn't give them permission to humiliate you, manipulate you, exploit you financially, or demand loyalty while offering none in return. Forgiveness also gets misunderstood. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation. You can release anger without reopening the door. You can wish someone well without inviting them back into your daily life. Distance isn't coldness. Sometimes it's wisdom. Now, I want to share something else that surprised me. A few months after Sophie was born, Jenna told me that Victoria had started therapy. Apparently, motherhood cracked something open for her. Holding that tiny human made her realize how much pressure she had carried growing up. Our parents' golden child treatment didn't actually help her. It trapped her. Imagine living your whole life terrified of falling off a pedestal, of disappointing people who only value you when you're winning. That kind of pressure attracts unhealthy relationships. Marcus wasn't random. He was part of that pattern. Learning that didn't erase what Victoria did to me, but it helped me release some resentment. She wasn't just the villain of my story. She was another product of the same dysfunctional system. I genuinely hope she heals. But her healing isn't my job. Speaking of legacy, I should tell you about something that makes me smile every time I think about it. Last year, I created the Catherine Whitmore Grant. $10,000, once a year. It goes to a woman over 25 who wants to pursue creative education after a non-traditional life path. When applications opened, I expected maybe 20 submissions. We got more than 400. Single mothers returning to school, women leaving abusive marriages and rebuilding careers, immigrants starting over in a new country. Every time I read their stories, I see pieces of myself. Catherine's generosity is multiplying. That's how love is supposed to work. Not hoarded inside dysfunctional families. Expanded outward. Now let me offer some practical advice if you're navigating toxic family dynamics. First, document patterns. Not to use as ammunition. Just for clarity. When gaslighting happens repeatedly, writing things down helps you remember the truth. Second, build support systems outside the family before making major changes. Friends, therapists, mentors, community matters. Third, expect something called an extinction burst. That's when people escalate manipulation after you start enforcing boundaries. It's uncomfortable, but it usually means the boundary is working. Fourth, prepare for smear campaigns. Toxic families often rewrite narratives to protect their image. Stay grounded in your reality. Fifth, therapy helps. Processing family trauma alone can feel overwhelming. You deserve professional support. And finally, remember this. You do not need to justify your boundaries to people who repeatedly violated them. You simply need to maintain them. Some people might say, Emma, this was easier for you because you had money. And honestly, financial security did reduce fear. I won't deny that. But here's the key detail. I set my emotional boundaries before the trust vested. The money amplified my choices. It didn't create my self-worth. Plenty of wealthy people stay trapped in toxic family systems because they haven't done the internal work. And plenty of people with far fewer resources successfully protect themselves through sheer courage. The trust helped. But it wasn't the hero of this story. I was. That doesn't mean everything feels perfect all the time. Sometimes I still feel grief. I'll see mothers and daughters shopping together and feel a small ache. Sometimes I wonder if I should have tried harder with Victoria. Sometimes I question whether my boundaries are too rigid. Then I remind myself of the facts. I did try. I warned them about Marcus. I offered connection. I asked for basic respect. They mocked me. At some point, repeated patterns stop being accidents. They become data. Grieving the relationship you wished existed is normal. But grief doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. Zoom out for a second. Society teaches women to be peacemakers, to sacrifice ourselves for harmony, to smooth conflicts even when we didn't create them. But when entire families operate under those expectations, abuse continues quietly. Dysfunction becomes tradition. Breaking that cycle requires someone brave enough to say, "Not me, not anymore." Maybe that person is you. Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting people abandon family after the first disagreement. Healthy families argue. They misunderstand each other. They hurt feelings sometimes. But they repair those moments with genuine apologies, with changed behavior, with mutual respect. That's normal conflict. What isn't normal? Chronic scapegoating, public humiliation, financière exploitation, manipulation disguised as love, conditional acceptance based on obedience. Learn the difference. One situation needs patience and communication. The other needs boundaries and distance. If my story resonated with you, share it. Not because I need views, but because someone you know might feel trapped inside a similar dynamic. And hearing that they're not crazy could change their life. If you feel safe doing so, tell your story too. Community creates healing. And if you're currently dealing with toxic family dynamics, start small. Set one boundary. Just one. See what happens. You might be surprised by your own strength. My grandmother gave me money. But more importantly, she gave me a mirror. One that reflected my actual worth instead of my family's distorted version. You don't need a trust fund to find that mirror. You need honest people who see you clearly. The courage to believe what they reflect. And the radical self-compassion to choose your own well-being. That's the real inheritance. Self-knowledge, self-respect, self-love. Everything else is just details. So thank you for listening to my story. I'm Emma. I'm 30 years old. I live in a condo I bought myself. I do work that feeds my soul. I'm surrounded by people who celebrate me. And I'm building a life my grandmother would be proud of. Not because it's perfect, but because it's mine. I hope you build yours too. You deserve it. If you've made it this far into the story, I want to pause for a moment and talk directly to you. Not as a character in a drama, not as someone who just told a long story about family betrayal and finding freedom, just as a person who understands how complicated family relationships can be. Because chances are, if this story resonated with you even a little, it's not just entertainment for you. Something in it probably felt familiar. Maybe you've been the one in your family who always felt like you had to prove yourself. Maybe you've been the one who noticed the unfair treatment, but stayed quiet to keep the peace. Maybe you've tried over and over again to be understood, to explain your side, to earn the kind of love that seemed to come so easily for someone else. If any part of that sounds like your story, then I want you to know something very important. You're not alone, and more importantly, you're not wrong for wanting better. One of the biggest reasons stories like this matter is because they help people recognize patterns in their own lives. Sometimes we grow up in environments where certain behaviors feel normal simply because they've always been there. Criticism that never stops. Love that feels conditional. Family gatherings that leave you emotionally exhausted instead of supported. Being compared constantly to siblings or relatives. Feeling like you're the problem every time you speak up. When that's the reality you've known for years, it can be incredibly hard to trust your own perspective. That's why conversations like this matter. They remind people that their experiences are valid. They remind people that boundaries are not acts of cruelty, they're acts of self-respect. And they remind people that building a healthy life sometimes requires difficult choices. So if this story spoke to you in any way, here's something I'd love for you to do. Take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Ask yourself a simple question. Have I been living in a way that honors my peace? Or have I been constantly sacrificing it just to keep other people comfortable? There's no judgment in whatever answer comes to mind. Life is complicated, and relationships, especially family relationships, are rarely simple. But awareness is always the first step toward change. And sometimes hearing someone else's journey gives us the courage to start examining our own. If you found yourself thinking about someone while listening to this story, maybe a friend, a sibling, or someone who might need to hear it, consider sharing it with them. You never know when a story might be exactly what someone needs at the right moment. Sometimes, a single conversation can make a person feel less alone in something they've been carrying silently for years. Stories create connection, and connection creates strength. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Not because this is just a video that needs engagement, but because your voices matter too. If you feel comfortable, share your thoughts about the story. What moment resonated with you the most? Was there a part that reminded you of something in your own life? Do you believe boundaries can actually change family dynamics, or do you think they mostly create distance? Every perspective adds something valuable to the conversation. And sometimes reading someone else's experience helps another viewer realize they're not the only one going through something difficult. That kind of community is powerful. At the same time, I want to say something very important. If you are currently dealing with toxic family dynamics, please remember that you don't have to solve everything overnight. Big life changes rarely happen in one dramatic moment. They usually start with small decisions, small acts of self-respect, small boundaries that gradually reshape how people treat you. Maybe it starts with saying no to something you normally feel pressured to accept. Maybe it starts with limiting how much emotional energy you give to conversations that always leave you drained. Maybe it starts with simply acknowledging that your feelings deserve to be taken seriously. Those steps may seem small, but they can create huge shifts over time. Growth is rarely loud. Most of the time it's quiet, steady, and deeply personal. And if you're someone who's already been doing that work, learning to protect your peace, learning to value yourself, even when others don't fully understand your choices, I want to acknowledge how strong that makes you. It's not easy to break cycles that have existed for years. It takes courage to choose a healthier path, and that courage deserves recognition. Another thing I'd encourage you to do is continue seeking stories that inspire growth and reflection. Whether it's through books, podcasts, conversations with friends, or channels like this one, surrounding yourself with thoughtful narratives can help you see situations from new perspectives. Stories are powerful teachers. They show us possibilities we might not have considered before. They help us understand human behavior, emotional resilience, and the complexity of relationships. And sometimes they simply remind us that life can change in ways we never expected. If you enjoy deep storytelling like this, stories about resilience, complicated families, personal transformation, and the quiet strength it takes to build a life on your own terms, make sure you stay connected here. There are many more narratives like this one that explore different sides of human experience. Some will make you think. Some might challenge your perspective. Some might even help you understand parts of your own life in a new way. So if that kind of storytelling resonates with you, consider supporting the channel. You can do that by liking the video, subscribing if you haven't already, and turning on notifications so you don't miss future stories. It's a simple action, but it helps keep these conversations going. And it helps create a space where people can share, reflect, and grow together. Before we end, I want to leave you with one final thought. Every person deserves a life where they feel respected, valued, and emotionally safe. Sometimes that environment comes from the family we're born into. Other times, we have to build it ourselves through friendships, chosen communities, and personal boundaries. Either path is valid. What matters most is that you don't give up on the idea that you deserve peace. Because you do. Your story matters. Your feelings matter. And the life you're building, no matter how different it looks from someone else's expectations, is worthy of pride. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, reflecting, and engaging with stories that explore the complexities of human relationships. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to share your thoughts below. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.